Hi guys, welcome back. It's Nick here. We're back with the transport game in Unity, and in the last episode we just finished doing a few things with our chunk loading script. We had a slight error. Well, I say slight error, it's actually a pretty major error. Good thing is we get a nice set of 9 terrains drawn. If I go into the scene view, you can see we actually have 9 separate objects here, here, all set up nicely for us. Because the camera is set up here, and as I move the camera we generate a new set of chunks and unload some. However, the terrains that are reused are not the correct ones. We want the game to reuse these 3 here, but in fact it's using the ones right in front of us, which is not actually correct. And there's a few other things in the code that we should probably take a look at and make sure they're nice and clean, ready to move on. Let's start by fixing that problem. Which actually resides in our on-camera move function. So we generate a new vector2 array of the visible chunks, but in addition to this I actually want to generate a new terrain array that represents where the terrains are moving to. I'm going to collapse a few of these methods up here so we can scroll to the top a bit quicker. Okay, so we need a new chunk graphics array. So I'm just going to add it here, or I might add it a bit lower down so I can see it a bit better. So terrain square brackets, which indicates it's an array, and I'm going to call it new chunk graphics. There we go. And I'm going to make it equal to a new terrain array with 9 elements in it. Actually, I don't need those normal brackets there because we're not initializing those yet. And it's actually in this loop that I want to initialize some of the elements of this terrain array. So when the new visible chunks is matched up, what we want to do is set the new chunk graphics at the I position equal to chunk graphics at the J position. So that maintains the chunks where they should be if they're matched up, and rearranges them in the array, but it doesn't actually rearrange them in physical space. Okay, to make sure that the loading doesn't overwrite any terrains that are already in use, we're going to have to work out which terrains are free to start with. So we're going to have to implement that later on in this saving chunk method. So I'm going to add a few extra curly brackets here because this indicates that the visible chunks at I, that index terrain, is actually free. So we need to maintain a list of the free indexes. I'm just going to do that with the list object of int. I'm just going to call that free terrains to new list of int. And the other thing that we need to maintain a list of is the chunks that needed to be loaded. So loading indexes, I'll call that list. I'm actually going to move these further up so we can use them earlier in the script. And we're going to populate these lists in the loops below. So here, instead of loading the chunk from memory, what we're actually going to do is delete that and add that index to the list of the terrains that need to be updated. I'm going to say loading indexes dot add, and we need to add the vector2 index, so I need to change the type of this list to a vector2, and we need to add visible chunks at I, so we know later on which chunks need to be reloaded. And here, when we're saving chunks, we need to save which index is now free. So under free terrains we're going to add I. simply I to know that that index terrain is free to be updated. And now the final loop we need to do is go, in fact I'm going to make this a for each loop, and this is going to be for every vector 2 in this list. So it's going to be vector 2 terrain in loading indexes. And for each one we need to load chunk from memory, and it's going to be terrain. And actually I realise now we do need a loop counter for this one, so I'm going to change this back to a for loop with I as the loop counter. Yeah, I forgot we'd need a loop counter for this one because we're using two different lists, and I believe it's when you're using lists, it isn't the length that doesn't exist, it's a count method rather than length, because the list length can change at any point. And down here, instead of terrain, it's now loading indexes at index I and free terrains at index I. And that should stop us getting this problem where we are basically using the wrong terrain to reload. And the final thing we need to do is set the new visible chunks, the new chunk graphics at the index equal to the one in the old chunk graphics. Okay, so we actually need another piece of information to run this. We need to know the index in the new chunk graphics that needs to be filled. So I'm actually going to add one more list here. I'm just going to call it new index. It's going to be another integer. And down here I'm going to add that as... in fact, I think I can modify this to work out for us. If we can maintain these two lists, if I change this vector 2 array to an integer array and simply save this I value up here, down here instead of loading indexes .I, we can actually access that again like we were doing above and get the visible chunks at that index that we saved in the list, and now we can use this value again later on. That just saves on having three lists. So the new chunk graphics is equal to chunk graphics at free terrains I. So this might be a little bit complicated with all the square brackets, and hopefully it works. I guess we'll just have to give it a test, and yeah, hopefully it will work for us. The last thing we need to do here is just set chunk graphics equal to new chunk graphics. Okay, let's see if we get any compiler errors. Okay, no errors so far, so it's looking okay. Let's see if this works out for us. Okay, we've instantly got a null reference exception. Let's just have a look around our scene. Okay, let's have a look where this is. It's in on-camera move. Okay, this is because the visible chunks isn't actually initialized yet. So I think in this case, if it's null, we're just going to have to add it straight off. Actually, I'm not quite sure why that would be that way. The null reference would be in the visible chunks array because that's not initialized. However, up here it would have been not initialized either, so I'm not quite sure why we're getting an error here when we weren't earlier. Okay, I think I've spotted the problem here. Instead of using visible chunks here, we're supposed to be using the new visible chunks because we're trying to load a new chunk into the game. Hopefully that should stop any more errors popping up. We'll just give this another go. Okay, we've got an argument out of range exception. So we've got the first error gone. So terrain manager line 49. One of the things about Visual Studio that slightly annoys me is it doesn't show you a line number by default. I can't actually find the way to do that yet. If someone knows how to do that, that would be really useful, but I haven't yet found a way. So I'm just going to look through this error message here. So I believe it's line 176. Oh no, they're down here. 176 is okay here. So I believe one of these numbers is too large for the list it's in, which I think would be the free terrains. I'm just going to add a debug statement just to check to see if those lists are the same size. So I'm going to do freeterrains.count plus a comma, and then I'm going to do loading indexes.count. So we have 0 and 9, so we can see that the free terrains isn't being populated at all initially, and that's because the game doesn't think there are any free terrains because we haven't initialized, well, we haven't set any terrains to be unloaded, as we'd not, as it's the start of the game we need to load a load of chunks but we don't need to unload any. So this is actually just a special case. I'm going to add a special case for this here in the else block, and I'm just going to add, in fact I'll copy and paste this loop and just modify it slightly. So we don't need any of the code below here or up here. All we need to do is just add all of the free terrains, so we say every terrain is free. Okay, we'll see if this works. Okay, now you can see the array, the lists, sorry, are both the same length, so everything is running fine, and we have 9 terrains around as before. Let's move forward. Okay, now you can see the terrains have moved themselves to form their way around the camera, so that is working correctly. I'm just going to move forward once more to check if it works completely, because sometimes things can act slightly strangely if you move in different ways in systems like these. Okay, so the camera is definitely being followed around by these terrains, which is absolutely perfect. I know we've got a few more errors than usual this time, but this is quite an important thing to get done, so I'm pleased that it's working now. One of the things I'm actually going to do this episode is remove this terrain. It was alright at first, but in our modifications we've kind of destroyed this, so it's not really necessary anymore, so I'm going to get rid of the terrain and the water here. Now I see it's pretty bare, but when we start it up... Oh, okay, that does ruin our terrain manager, because it doesn't have a main terrain. But we'll fix that later. When we start it up, when we'll generate our full worlds, then it'll look just as good as before, except it'll be completely procedural. And I think that's what we're going to work on next time. We've covered enough of the chunk management, now we just need to fill those chunks with interesting stuff. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next time when we're doing that.